Hey, welcome to Tami Talks, Grub, Gab, Growth. I am super excited that you're here today. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I was really excited to put together a place where people can come and learn about being resilient. And I know there's a lot of definitions out there, but for me, being resilient is really being able to not just bounce back through your challenges, but to bounce back stronger. So every week on Tami Talk, I'm looking forward to having different guests who have, life experiences that might not be the same as yours, but they have skills that are transferable to whatever situation you're going through. So I want you to imagine, like back in the day, that you're sitting in a kitchen. Maybe it was at your mom's house or your grandmother's house, or you are, at a friend's house. But there was some magic that happened in the kitchen, and particularly at that kitchen table. People would come from wherever they were, and it would usually be sort of a ragtag group of people, some older, some young kids in there. But at the kitchen table, you started solving the world's problems through our lens, right? But more importantly, you started helping people solve their individual problems. So whether they were around relationships or it was around work or career or friends, there was always a place at the table to have that conversation. So I am excited every week to bring you those types of conversations, and hopefully you'll feel like you're at the table. But what I wanted to do today is talk to you about probably what is one of my obsessions when it comes to resilience, which is what we can learn from sports as we develop our resilience muscle. And in order to do that, I'm super excited to welcome a very good friend of mine, Billy Taylor. You there, Billy?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. So for
Can you hear
those who
me?
don't know, I can hear you. For those who don't know, Billy is a former New York Giant and NFL player for a couple of teams. I think what he's most proud of is that he's a corporate trainer, teaching everything from being of service, great customer service to communication skills. He's a radio talk show host, and I'll let him tell you about that. And he's very involved in Big Brothers Big Sisters and athletes helping athletes. Billy, I'm so glad we've stayed connected for all these years, and I want to welcome you to Tami Talks.
I am so impressed with you, and I thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. And I love your subject matter, resilience, because that's part of life. Its general message is you can never give up.
Yeah, it is. That is the general message, and I think getting to that point of never giving up is sort of the tools that we're looking to dissect. So, I think a lot of people, and Billy, people are like, oh, you just, you dust yourself off and you keep going. But for some people, it's just not that simple. So you've been an athlete your entire life, needless to say. I've been an athlete. And I think there's a lot to learn about resilience from either playing sports or watching sports. And let me give you like my thought, and then I want to get your reaction. So I think regardless of the sport, athletes face a wide range of physiological, emotional, and physical stressors that impact their performance. Um, and these, when we talk about stresses, we could talk about injuries, which we've seen lately in the NFL. We could talk about performance slumps, which, I don't know anything about that because I've never had a slump. Just kidding. Uh, conflicts with the coach or your team, career transitions. I know you've experienced a lot of this. And by the way, the pressure to perform no matter what's going on in your life. So, what are your general thoughts about athletes and this concept of resilience? Do you feel like all athletes have this as part of their DNA, or is it a muscle that athletes have to build also?
I think athletes have to build it also, but I've really noticed the difference between people who are non-athletes and athletes because I do that thing that you mentioned, athletes helping athletes, and what happens is that if a kid is trying out for soccer, lacrosse, or a sport, and he doesn't do good right away, they quit. And I see that around the country that a lot of people, when they're not successful, they quit. But what you're supposed to do is fight your way through it and try to figure out another way to do it. see, like myself, I know, I grew up in Texas, but when I first came to Texas, I was third string, and I was kind of mad at that, and I went like 5 or 6 games and never played in the game. And I went and talked to my dad about it, and he said, Billy, don't ever quit because you'll get in the habit of quitting. And so that's probably what resilience is being able to hang in there. And I hung in there until the last game of the season. The guy who played in front of me at running back, he got hurt. And then I went in and played my first high school game, do anything, but I was just happy to be there. And that inspired me to work even harder, to be resilient, to take the position going into the next season.
So do you think it's good enough to, and I know like probably you and I grew up in like a different era, right? Where people were just, they weren't as sympathetic. Like you're hurt, either, get back in the game or go sit on the side. You had a bad game, like shake it off. There wasn't like a whole lot of conversation around like what shake it off looks like.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, what I like is that they have professional people in charge now who don't make the decision what they used to make. When I even played for the Giants, if the guy said, Billy, are you okay? All you had to do was answer him yes, and then he'd send you back on the field. And most athletes, they always want to get back on the field. So that's part of a resilience. But then also you can get hurt worse by not listening to the people who are professionals. And there's a difference between being injured and being hurt. And you got to recognize that, because one, you can have resilience on and come back. The other one, we can hurt yourself worse.
I know, but I think part of the problem, Billy, like fundamentally is I don't think that's real resilience when an athlete gets back on the field. Well, it is resilience in some ways, but they're also being motivated by a check, right? So somebody, you get bonuses based on playing time and touchdowns and blocks and this and that. So is that real resilience, or is that like your wallet talking?
Well,
Like I got to get up and go play.
Yeah, but say that you're in a situation where it gets really tough, and you're trying to decide, should I hang in there or should I try and wait for another day? If you have anything inside you and you're not hurt, I think you'll sit there and try to fight your way back. If someone's beating you in any whether it's spelling bee or playing basketball, you want to be able to make sure that you are prepared. I think you've heard the adage that you prepare for something, it gives you an advantage when you go in, and that's what I look at resiliency too, as part of being prepared to do whatever task is asked. And if you do have a downfall or make a mistake or things don't go right, you'll figure out a way to get it done. I think resiliency is figuring out a way to get it done when people think there's no way to get it done.
Mm-hmm. So that's a good point. And I think, so there's some really great tools. And you touched on it before, and I'm going to get back to that in a second, but there's some really great tools that you can develop as an athlete that I think people that do not play sports, nor do they watch sports, have a more difficult time developing some of these skills. For example, listen, being an athlete, and you can attest to this, you need to have an optimistic mindset all the time, right? Even when you're losing, even maybe you're on the sideline, you're not even in the game. How do you think developing an optimistic mindset, first of all, can help little kids that are just starting to play sports?
Well, I think one of the things is how in anything you do, and like my mom and dad were teachers, but they say anything you do, if you want to get better, you can. If you're not doing as well in math, what do you do about it? If you're not doing well in certain things in school and you don't play sports, how do you learn the aspect of never giving up? And I think the way you do it is by practicing perfect, because it's the old adage about how do you get to Carnegie Hall? You practice. And I think anybody who gives an effort on something, they will at least have a little bit of resilience, because if it's a desire in your heart to do something, you should never quit. But the thing, as I said before, is that too many young kids try something for the first time, whether it was a new math class or a new sport, and they're not successful, they quit. They have a lack of resiliency. And I think that what we have to do as mentors is get people to realize that everybody makes a mistake. It's just a matter of what do you do about it. And then you were talking about winning and losing before. I think and I hate to admit it because I hate to lose, but you learn more by losing than winning. And that's the hard part because nobody wins all the time, whether it's LeBron James or anybody, Michelle Obama. Everybody has to be able to figure out what to do when things are not the way they should be. And there's nothing that goes perfect. So that's the way you become a better person, is by when things happen like this, you get better at it, you understand it better, and it even increases the resiliency that you have as you go through life.
Yeah, I have a really listen, let's talk about what's going on nowadays, right? The kids are, let's say you're going out to play Little League Baseball, right? You're 5 years old. It's your first time out. It's probably T-ball. Maybe your parents have helped
The
you.
subject is
Maybe they
resiliency.
haven't. But um, you end up on the bench. And the parents, I'm talking about today's parents, they get upset because their kid's not in the game. And you're being, as a little kid, it's like, parents who've played sports maybe say, you know what? If you don't want to ride the bench, you have to do what you have to do to get better. But there's a lot of parents out there that never played sports, and they immediately, like, the kid doesn't play, it looks like they're not going to be good. They tell them, like, yeah, you can quit. We'll go find something else. We'll go try something else. Like, I think this participation society that we live in, where everybody gets a trophy just for showing up, has seriously impacted kids' ability to develop resilience, because there's always like something else you can do that you might succeed at.
And I also think that parents are getting too involved in the course of the referees and umpires when they need to keep their mouth closed, because the kid's going to figure it themselves. Not They don't need the parent to yell at the umpire or yell at the coach because their kid is not doing what they should do. I think as long as the kid is involved in sports, and I encourage most parents to allow their kids to play sports, especially at a young age, because you learn to work together, you learn what it takes to work together, you learn what it takes to be a teammate, and you learn if something doesn't go right, you fight through adversity, make it stronger. And I think that's the key thing that I learned in sports, is that there's always going to be adversity. How do you deal with it? That's the bottom line for me.
Yeah, I do think that's one of the most important takeaways for like our little kids. And I have 4 kids. I encouraged all of them to play sports, because there's a lot to learn. But let me ask you, we have a couple minutes before break. Like, what now? Let's keep on this topic of the little kids, like the 5, let's say the 9-year-olds, maybe. How about the kids that are not encouraged to play sports? Like,
Well, see,
they're
go ahead.
like, how do we build resilience in those little kids that don't have sports?
Well, I think you have to teach them that life is not always peanut butter and jelly. Life is a strings of up and downs, and sometimes things are going to go great. And I think that's why you have to teach people to kind of be able to understand things, because when things don't go right, what do you do about it? I mean, do you want to fight somebody? Do you want to get upset and throw things, or do you want to figure out a way to make it better? And I think the first thing I always do, and even my little son, when he was 5 years old, I used to tell him, no matter what happens, if things go wrong, just be calm and think about what's going to happen in the future. What can you do to make it better? What can you do to change the situation? And those are all things that kids need to do. I really hate to add is that when something happens and they get mad, they go on to something else, because it gets you in the habit of quitting. And you
Hmm.
ever think that this is a habit. If things don't go right, I'll quit. I don't allow my uh, teammates or friends or family members to even think about the word quit. I don't even like to use the word quit in my vocabulary because it's such a negative feeling.
I agree with everything you're saying. I do also believe, and we're going to jump to break in just a second here. Let's pick this up when we come back, because I think we are raising kids in a society where maybe it's not the word quit, but trial and error is okay. Like, I didn't do well at baseball, so I'm going to go try lacrosse. Oh, I suck at lacrosse. Let me go try soccer. And then eventually they end up like playing the trombone
Or marbles.
or marbles or jump rope. Anyway, okay, so listen, Billy, love the conversation. Hang in there. We're going to take a really quick break, and then I want to come back and maybe talk more about what parents can do to help build resilient kids, because resilient kids become resilient adults. So let's talk about that when we get back.
Have you ever asked the question, if I was to be anything, what would I be? Regardless of money, regardless of status, beyond popularity and fame. Living your passion, feeling your life has purpose. Solidity is a space to nurture that which lives in all of us. A place where work can become play, and doing what we love creates the dreams of a lifetime.
Hey, welcome back to Tami Talks. I am so excited to have Billy Taylor as my special guest today. Billy's a former New York Giant. More importantly, he's a motivational speaker and an all-around great guy. You still there, Billy?
I'm still. I'm still. Can you
Uh-oh.
hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm mute.
That's okay. So I wanted to take this theme. If we listen, resilient kids become resilient adults, and non-resilient kids become non-resilient adults. And at the end of the day, we're trying to build strength of character and having foresight and be able to bounce back from your setbacks. What do you say to parents who don't encourage their kids to play sports? You mentioned it's a new math class. I feel like academic resilience is a little bit different.
Yep.
Do you agree with that, or do you think it's the same?
I totally agree. But see, you have to develop that from a young age on a mindset, like trying to take a positive perspective on situations. It's easy to say it's half full or half empty, but if you start the kids off as being positive in the very beginning, I think it just kind of carries over. And then every challenge you have, you look at it as a learning opportunity, and you teach your kids from the jump street, excuse me, that every time something happens, then you can learn from it. It makes you a better person. And then I think also, you have to kind of control emotions. Some people go crazy when something happens, but if you start to think about what's forward and what's not backward, they used to say only think backward to gain strength to go forward. And then I think you have to. My mom always used to tell me that you need to focus on things that you can control. When something happens and you don't play sports, I think you have to think about what you can do about it and what you can do about it, because there's certain things that are wasting your energy and time, and you got to be able to figure that out. And I think that's all part of the resilient people are supposed to possess.
I do think all of what you just said is you have to build that muscle.
Yep.
Or you have to be raised around that muscle. You have to be raised in an environment where people just don't quit. They don't take no for an answer. But I don't know. I know a lot of adults that have trouble bouncing back in their own life. So how do you trickle that down to your kids? If you're not being a role model for yourself?
It's like doing what I say and not what I do.
Yeah, exactly. Ignore me. Just do what I'm telling you to do. So,
well, you know yourself that the best way is through positive reinforcement. But if you are not really a good example, you got to preach it. You got to preach about never giving up, about trying to always give your best, make it a habit to do your best, all those things, because more positive reinforcement that you have, especially for young kids. And I've learned in my little training stuff that they judge a lot of stuff by the time a kid goes to third grade. As a matter of fact, in Texas, I just learned that if a kid is not reading at a certain level by third grade, they build a new prison. And that blows me away, because that means you're not giving effort on it. And that's true for Texas. They lead a nation in prisons. And that's, for me, that's a negative, because I grew up there. But I still think that you should never give up on any kid. Even if a kid's going to fifth grade and read, there's still ways to help them do that. We got more technology up for us now than ever before. So I think the thing you have to do it. And if you're not a good parent and you don't want them to play sports, you got to have a reinforcement that is able to mold kids how they are. I have a little son who I have molded, and I see him doing exactly what I wanted him to do. I wanted him to be polite to people. I want him to open the door for ladies. His grandmother is close to 80 years old, and he takes care of her by opening the door, carrying things for her. And it's become a habit for him. And I think he's most resilient when he gets around people because he shows his manners. I have enough of those.
Mm-hmm. That's been your thing forever. I remember
Yes.
you came to Jersey. You're like, I don't know about Jersey, folks. I don't say good morning. And
They don't say
there's
good
more
night
to Jersey.
either.
There's more to Jersey than good morning. We got Taylor ham and cheese. So let me ask you a question, Billy. Let's move from kids to talking about adults. What you've rattled off a bunch, which I think are useful, but I'm just curious, like, what are the 3 to 5 things that helped you build your own resilience throughout your life? And I know you've been through some stuff, and you've been through, team changes, you've been through career changes. What do you think you learned from being an athlete from a young age all the way through being a professional, NFL player? Like, what are 3 to 5 things that you've learned that have you carried into adulthood that you think other people can benefit from?
That's a great question. But as I look at it and just right off the top of my head, I look at people who have patience. Not a lot of people have patience, and I think that I have outstanding patience. Sometimes I get a little frustrated, like when I couldn't get my equipment together today or whatever. But most of the time, patience allows you to see things clearly. And the second thing is be responsible for what you do. Resilience is being responsible, making the right decision, making the correct wordage of things. And see, I think that being responsible, it shows a lot. It shows examples of what people can do. And I think also problem solving, because when things happen, how do you look at it? How do you make it better? How do you get out of the situation to give yourself an opportunity to do it again? And I really believe in problem. And then self-awareness. Be aware of everything around you, of how you're acting, how you talk, how you dress, how you present yourself to people. And I think those things allow you and especially from my point, to be resilient in everything that you do. I mean, resiliency, if you think about it, it's about everything you do. About how you up in the morning, how you are responsible for your job situations, are you responsible for other people, are you flexible when things don't go right? Are you able to make an exception? What I learned in football was that if somebody's beating you, then make a change. Do something different. Don't continue to accept somebody beating you. Do something about it. And I think that's resiliency.
Well said. I'm wondering, what, now this is a tough one because it's off the top of your head. What was one of the greatest challenges you faced in your life, whatever you want, but professionally, as an athlete, as a parent, like whatever? What did you draw on to get through it? What did you draw on to get through it? And like, help us learn some lessons here.
Well, mine's a pretty simple one. I had a couple. One was my dad was in the Army, and we traveled a lot, and we came from Seattle, Washington to San Antonio, Texas, where he retired. I didn't realize it, but in Texas, they're big on ball. I didn't know it then. And so I practiced like everybody else, and the guy wouldn't let me play because he said I wasn't there before practicing, so why should I get ahead of everybody else? And that kind of made me mad. So what I did was I did everything I'd read about and I talked about was I stayed after practice to work on my game. I came early, stayed late, and did all those things. And then when I went to my dad, because I didn't play, it says, just make sure you hang in there because you don't want to get any bad habits. And I was so happy that I had the resiliency to hang in there that it allowed me to flourish because I knew I could draw back on that. When things happen in your life, how do you reflect on what you can do to make it better? And now those situations come up and I don't even have a speed bump on them. And the other one was a little different. I didn't do well in school. I think when I was probably in grade school, and we were playing a championship game, and my mother took me out of the game because she wanted to prove that the school is more important than sports. And she said, you can make them better, go hand in hand. And I was so upset at my mom. I mean, I probably, talked every kind of language I could talk to her, but it didn't sway her. But the thing it did was that it made me make my grade better. And I never had a situation, and that was probably, I'm thinking the fourth grade Little League, and I never had a situation then where my grades were involved, because when you go to college, if you don't maintain a certain grade point, they kick you off whether your mom and dad is there or not. So it allowed me to get to that point and realize what's ahead and what's at stake, and that, you got to be able to balance your life.
Billy, you bring up a couple of many good things, but one thing is being able to put bumpers on ourselves. So your mom pulled you out of the game because your grades weren't there, and I'm sure that was embarrassing. Your dad was like, listen, do what you got to do. I guess at some point, whether you're a kid or an adult, you have to learn how to put bumpers on your life, right? And those just like at the bowling alley, they put those things in the lane so your ball can't go in the lane.
Yep.
I think it's good practice to maybe develop a couple of bumpers by which you live your life, or through the lens which you see your life.
Well,
would you
my
agree?
favorite
What
one,
are some of those bumpers do you think?
my favorite one is something I've been using for a long time. Is I said the way you think controls the way you act, and sometimes you have to curve your thinking to think in a more positive way and get away from the negative stuff sometimes that you see on TV. So if you're thinking about it, your attitude controls your effort. And I learned that, I've made that a way of life probably ever since the ninth grade, because I was a little negative something, and then my dad talked to me about, there's a difference between negativity and positivity. And if you start out with positivity, you can always, go make it even better. But sometimes if you go negative, then everything after that is negative. So I think my attitude and the way that I learn to think about things controls the way that I do things around people. And I think that it needs to kind of, make sure that I'm positive and show positivity and try to bring people in rather than push them out.
Love it. So I'm going to recap. I'm gonna give all your brilliance right now back in a quick recap, because you know what? I always wanted to have a show that people can leave at the end and take some actionable tools with them to go back into their life. So here's a couple of things that you said, which I thought were awesome, and feel free to jump in and clarify. The first thing you said is patience, which I think is an incredible skill, one that I am still working on. But being patient, you said, allows you to see clearly. And I think, one thing I've appreciated about you for all of these decades of knowing you is that you are a voice of reason, because you're very patient in surveying the situation and getting all the inputs that you need before you make a decision. I think that's a big one. You said be responsible for what you do. And I would also say be responsible for what you can control, right? So I think a lot of the reasons why people flip out, Billy, is because they're fighting things that are completely outside of their control.
Absolutely.
Which is frustrating and aggravating. You mentioned problem solving, developing problem solving skills, having self-awareness. And I loved what you said. You essentially said, be aware of how you show up in the world, what you wear, how you talk, who you interact with. I think that is a big thing. And the last thing you just mentioned was remembering that your attitude controls your effort. I think those are all fantastic seeds of wisdom. Did you want to add any more in there? I mean, I don't care, athlete, not an athlete. Those are all really good life lessons.
I probably could go on another hour, but I just like my father was instrumental in probably my attitude, because he always made people feel good about themselves. When people greet you for the first time, and especially I'm over 6 feet and 200 pounds, and sometimes I don't want to be intimidating to people. So what he used to do is make people feel good about themselves before he told them about himself. And that makes people let their hair down. It's almost like you're welcoming somebody into your house, but you're welcoming into your thought process. And I like that way of thinking, because some people wait till other people try to bring their hair down, but when you meet somebody the first time and you do it yourself, I've seen you do it where, you greet people and make them feel good. And I think if everybody did that, we would have a different world.
I agree. All right, we're like running out of time when I have you on again, but I wonder all of these terrible crises that are happening in the world. If somebody had just said good morning to somebody, or how's your day going, or given them a smile, might that have been enough to, throw them off course in terms of whatever dastardly deed they were doing?
Well, what's really interesting, and I'll say this very quickly, is you mentioned in the beginning that I work for athletes helping athletes. And what they do is we go around and teach kids how to make presentations. But what I have learned is that if you're not an athlete, if you're not a cool kid, you're not a cheerleader, you're just a kid that goes to school. Sometimes, and every school has this, where a kid is going around with their books in their hands and nobody says no to them. No friends are reaching out to them. So what I ask the athletes to do, if they see that, I'm not asking them to take them to dinner, take them to lunch. Just reach out and say hello, just like you just did. Just say hello, how's your day? And that will make someone's day and probably help somebody from doing something that could be worse because they have no one else around them. I mean, I've only noticed it since I've started doing this, but there are a lot of schools where the kids who don't get involved in stuff. And we talked about, some kids don't play sports or don't get involved in stuff, and they're loners. And just reach out to other kids in your school and say hello.
Yeah, that's a good point. By the way, are they loners or are they lonely? There's a big difference.
I think they're lonely because they're carrying their books in their hands and they never have somebody with them. They don't reach out to people, they don't talk to people, and people don't reach out to them because they're not quote unquote popular kids.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing this work with you because I do think we can go into schools and teach this idea about resilience to kids that may or may not have guidance. But Billy, I want to thank you so much for coming on. I know you have a sports podcast. Do you know? Look, I'm putting you on the spot. Do you know where we could listen to it?
Yeah, we're on YouTube and what's the radio station that's on your Sirius Radio? We're on Sirius Radio. I'm with the guy named Charles Way. Charles Way played fullback for the Giants, but now he's the director of player personnel. And we do this. I don't know when it's on YouTube or Sirius Radio because I don't have Sirius Radio, but I've seen it on YouTube and every week.
All right, awesome. So I'll tell you what. When we're done, we will we'll post a link when we post the replay so that we can all listen in. Thank you, my friend.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, and and let me know when you're gonna send out food or something.
It's already on your front step. I did Uber Eats. It's on your front doorstep.
that was good.
Some ribs, some mac and cheese. All right, y'all. Thank you for joining in to Tami Talks. We're looking forward to another great conversation next week with actor, motivational speaker, Ed Blunt. Have a great week. Billy, I'll talk to you soon.
This work is subject to copyright owned by Affinity Global LLC. Any reproduction or republication of all or part of this is expressly prohibited unless Affinity Global LLC has explicitly granted its prior written consent. All other rights reserved.